Well, I guess I'll just click the recording button here and away we go. So, obviously, this is another episode of Grimdark Therapy. What are we up to? Like 12 episodes? Something like that?
Something close to that. Yeah,
Yeah,
thereabouts.
that's crazy. So, they're going quicker than I thought, but like in a good way. So, joining me once again is my fellow hosts, Kiefer from What the 40K and North from Northern Exile.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello.
So yeah, we're recording this on like my Sunday night slash North's getting home in the middle of the night slash Kiefer has just been dragged out of the crypt to record. So we're all in
The sun is rising. I can confirm.
we're all in the best condition to record.
It's literally the start of The Lion King where Kiefer is. And he's just sitting there with his rocking back and forth, 5 a.m.
So for today's topic, I was not 100% on it until like this morning. And essentially the topic is, when is an army not really an army, is what I'm sort of calling it. And this is hard to explain, but it's a combination of factions being both small and with factions having preferred play styles that the game really pushes people towards. I feel that over time, either because of competitive 40k or because of the price of the products or the way that the lore has laser focused people in a certain direction, or older models being less desirable than newer models, let's say like Firstborn Marines versus like the latest Primaris Marines, we've come to a point where people don't really collect Warhammer armies, I feel. They collect part of an army, enough to make a playable faction, and that's kind of it. I think that the person who goes out and goes, I want one of everything, has become really rare in this day and age. And I wanted to get your thoughts around this, and I've sort of suggested a few reasons as to why I think this might be. But, well, one, am I a crazy man? And two, if you do think this is real, what do you think is causing it?
I think answering the question straight away, like with something that I think is the minute you're not collecting an army is the minute that you're collecting it for what's good in the game rather than what inspires you. You know, I'm not an elitist in terms of painting. I'm not even a very good painter. But there's a whole point of this hobby to me is collecting models that you find interesting and bits of lore that you find interesting. And then you see a tournament and you go, oh, look, there's a tournament over there. Maybe all these models that I've got, I can make a list out of them and go to that tournament, right? I think you're more collecting game pieces if you're going into, if you say buy an army from eBay and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to this tournament, I need this list, so I'm going to go to eBay. That to me is not collecting an army. I know that's going to sound harsh, but to me, it's just not. Like you're literally not collecting an army at that point. You are collecting game pieces to be used at a tournament, which is fair enough if that's what you get out of it. I'm not here to judge. It's your kind of thing, not your dad. But that's just how I feel about it. I just think if you are collecting game pieces, fair enough. But if you want to say you collect an army, you've been inspired to do so either by the lore or the models themselves, or the ideas you got swirling around in your head for color schemes you might want to partake in. That's collecting an army rather than collecting it for an event or unless it's a game with friends. I don't know, grey area, I suppose.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, Maka, because I do think you're right. It is a multivariate problem. There's a bunch of contributing factors that are yielding to this trend, as we could call it. But to push back against North's position there, or maybe just to offer another side of the coin, right? I don't think it's exclusively only for power playing purposes. I do think you can have a thematic core to that style of wanting to desire a list, because it's sort of a perspective I've dabbled with as well. Because look, I've built a pretty sizable, newish, like a Primaris era successor chapter for Space Marines. It's a substantive collection, and I've sort of found it a little unrewarding based on how the rules are. And just from a like if you're a hobby bunny and you enjoy hobby variety, there's something to that idea of just having smaller collections. You paint it through, put it on the table for that reward. Maybe the rules are good, maybe the rules are bad, but you can build like look, so just for example, you could build an all Gravis Primaris Space Marine chapter and paint them a specific way and just sort of have fun with that gimmick, that sort of style of like that formation, you could call it. Now, I think the intent and the motivation behind it is going to inform how that army comes across on the table. If it turns out to just be a tournament list that happens to be competitive at the time, it's going to hurt how tasteful that kind of, it's going to hurt how tasteful what you're presenting is. But it could be just mid, or it could even be bad, right? Like for a lark, I've sort of just had this fond idea of collecting a Kroot army just because like, oh, look at what a fun little army of goobers this would be, right? I mean, not little, it'd be a lot of models, but just as a humble, non-competitive like I kind of I'm attracted to armies that are bad in a weird way. But that aside, I think my points come across, right? Like you can have thematic reasons for wanting to have a smaller, more limited collection of an army, even though it wouldn't be like the whole range. Does that?
I'm not saying No, it tracks. Yeah, I think I'm doing the same thing. Like I've in certain armies that I mean the Eldar army I'm collecting is very small because I only like the pirate, the Void Scarred models. I think they're really, really cool. So I'm building those and maybe a few craft world bits here and there. I'm not really interested in building an entire force of Eldar, and I think that sort of thing goes into my point. Yeah, you can collect an army without even collecting a gaming ready army. It could be one or two units that you just think are really cool, and you can really get some creative juices flowing over them, sort of a thing. That sounds horrible, but you know what I mean.
I get you.
Yeah, so I'm literally doing that right now, like what you said, and I think I collect Eldar. I'm not like sitting here going, well, I don't really collect Eldar because I've only got like 4 squads and it's not really an army. It's like, well, I don't give a shit if it's an army or not. Those are my Eldar and I collect them. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think collecting an army is. And it isn't a put down on people when I say, well, you're not collecting an army, you're collecting game people playing that tournament because that was your motivation for doing it,
Oh yeah, totally. I wasn't hope it didn't come across that way. I just wanted to offer
No.
the other side of that.
I'm just crystallizing the point for people.
Gotcha.
That's basically what I call as collecting an army is you've been inspired to do so. That's what the hobby is. Like the more we get into the weeds of okay, what's hot right now, what's good, what are we gonna, the minute you start going down that rabbit hole, you start to lose the joy of it. It becomes more. It's kind of like. Sorry, mate.
That's all good.
My grandpa stopped betting on sports games, on football games, because it ruined it for him. And he'd go looking for things like, oh, how many corners have there been? How many free kicks have there been? Oh, what did it? And he was sitting there going, do you know, I'm not even enjoying this game anymore. I'm not even enjoying watching this. I'm just going to stop, right? That's the kind of thing I think happens with some tournament players. They start to lose the wood for the trees. You're like, well, it takes the joy out of it. It takes the wonder out of it, You don't see how the sausage is made most of the time.
It certainly can be that way. It's one of the reasons I kind of prefer thematic lists and more narrative formats of 40K because match play tournament meta sort of skews list building in such a painful way for me. It really saps a lot of the. But I'm sure we'll get into that. I'm kind of tangenting the topic a little bit here, Maka. Sorry about that.
No, quite all right. So I'll give an example. For the longest of time, I was a huge Gondor fan, as in Minas Tirith, Lord of the Rings, Gondor. Going back to collecting Numenorian miniatures back in the year 2001, which I still have. I did get rid of quite a bit of my Minas Tirith forces in the end, but I had everything. When I say I had everything, I mean I had everything. I had the Dunedain of the North. I had the Halbarad miniatures, both with and without banner. Aragorn, Arathorn, every version of Aragorn. I had Imrahil, the Knights of Dol Amroth, all in white metal. I had Arvedui and Malbeth the Seer in white metal. Those who are listening would understand that for a very long period of time, those are just miniatures you could not get for like a good 10-year stretch. I collected that army, and for me, it was a point of like, hey, I can recreate any battles I want in, the history of Gondor with these, particular factions. I've got all of the miniatures up my sleeve available. And I had to collect that over a very long period of time. There was a lot of white metal in there, think blister pack every week or two for years on end in order to actually collect all of those characters, make that army happen. And it took probably a good 10, 15 years to get it all. And now I've sort of gotten rid of quite a fair bit of it because I'm more focused on Numenor and the Dunedain. But the Minas Tirith portion, I gave probably a dozen Guard of the Fountain Court, converted up with shields, very nicely, I'll add, to a friend. But my point being, I collected an army. Now, I don't really see that. When I see people, quote unquote, collect, and this is not everyone, there are always exceptions to the rule, okay? But I notice people collect just enough to make a playable faction. And my thought with that was like, okay, tournament, which we'll get into, definitely has a massive skewing effect. But also, money does. I'm looking right now on the Dark Angels page on Games Workshop, and just looking at the sheer amount of just characters alone, what incentive is there for you to buy all of the different characters at what they cost? Each character is probably 2 hours, 3 hours of work, full-time work as an adult, per character, and that's prior to any taxes or anything like that on your income. So if you were to play Dark Angels, what incentive is there to, even just to collect the core characters for the faction, like the Lion, Azrael, Lazarus, Asmodai, Belial, the Dark Angels Interrogator Chaplain, if you want to call it a character in and of itself. But just in those half a dozen named characters alone, that's a lot of income, for that faction. Before you've even looked at, getting your combat patrol, your Deathwing Knights, your inner circle companions, and what have you, or, do you want Ravenwing? Do you want Samuel? It's very restrictive. I think financially that plays a huge part in this, in that is buying a full collection of one army these days and a sort of attainable goal, or is it not a goal that people are interested in?
You raised an interesting point. I suppose it's kind of a cop-out answer. The incentive for players to do one or the other, to collect, for example, all the Dark Angels characters, is going to basically be where what drives their own personal motivation in the hobby, right? If you're a fluff bunny and maybe you love the lore, you love these prolific characters from the old days, and you're so pumped by a new Asmodai, you got to pick them up and paint all that smoke, right? Because you're into it, right? If you're a tournament player, well, I don't want to put them all under the same light, but I think there will be some people who will only collect an army that is competitive at the time and only use units that are good, in quotations. But I think on the long-term scale, I don't believe it's sustainable to just only collect what's good at the time, because rules change so frequently for tournament players. Like you can better win the long game as a tournament player, I believe. And look, I'm speaking a little out of reference here because it's not really my jam. But as an outsider looking in and talking to friends who are into the hobby in that aspect, it seems like you're better able to sustain things longer if you collect the range. You're just less likely to be out of sorts when it comes to the army you field, right? Because of points reasons or just nerfs or facts or whatever, new match play mission packs, a whole bunch of different components can change in that tournament or in that match play machine, and it has a lot of spillover and consequences to your armies. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. North, what do you think?
In terms of, I need to be reminded what the question was because I'm so engrossed in Kaifer's answer.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, but you know, the financial.
I was like trying to pick it apart as you were talking. I'm sorry.
Just the financial burden of trying to collect an army, has it made it unattainable? Is it not a problem? Do people just not want to even bother trying to collect a full army? Do they just want to collect what is a playable army?
Right. It's a massive stumbling block. We can't. The price is the elephant in the room. Like we can't. With the cost of living crisis, it's one thing that war gaming channels never really cover. I'm not sure if you're feeling it in Australia, but I know friends in the US are feeling the pinch, and in the UK, especially like over here, things are not good. Wages are so below the standard of living that you need to do in the UK right now in terms of rent and mortgage and power, gas, for your car, all these things. So, it is the huge elephant in the room is the price, and it's going to keep coming up because at the end of the day, I fully respect the point that people make when they say it's a hobby, it's a luxury. So, I get that. But Warhammer was always expensive, right? It was never extortionate. It was just expensive. It was a hobby. It's like trading cards, right? You're playing over the odds for little pieces of cardboard, really. Let's be honest, laminated cardboard with nice pictures on them. Video games, right? You're fixing up your car. All of these things cost money, but none of them I would frame are extortionate, unless you're a Nintendo fan these days. Then it is. But like, a video game, $60. You're gonna play it for 45, 50 hours. I say that's good value for money. You know what I mean? And it's fine. And the justification we used to get was that video game one where the Games Workshop manager would say, "Hey, well, the reason why we charge £35 for this plastic that's kind of worthless is because your video game, you spend 50 hours on it if you're lucky. You spend 50 hours on a $60 game, £60 game. This box set costs you £50, £60, and you're going to spend hundreds of hours on it because you're going to be building it, painting it, and then gaming with it for the rest of your hobby in life." Now I've always said that's a very optimistic way of looking at things, right? Somebody might build things relatively quickly and then paint them. You're not really getting it's all subjective value. But the price has only risen year on year on year on year. I don't think there's been a year where they haven't raised the price for 7 years now. We've gone a yearly price hike.
It's pretty consistent.
Yeah, so it is a stumbling block. I only know because I've got friends who've looked at the hobby and balk because they look at my YouTube channel and they go, "Hey, this is something I want to get involved in." North's doing this channel, and maybe we can do some battle report. And they look at the price and they go, "Fuck that shit." What? And then you've got what people don't understand is we want to paint and build models for a new guy coming in or girl, whatever, doesn't know whether they like it or not yet. So they're coming in, looking at those prices and going, "That can suck a dick. I'm not paying that for something that I don't even know whether I like or not. This video game over here, it's got all these tags on it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to like it. Because I like other things that are like that, you know what I mean? But this war game, it's a hell of a leap. So it is a huge stumbling block, a hurdle to get over, is that price. It is very... one thing that I've always said to people, if you're not sure about this hobby, buy one small set and make that. You come into it very, very slowly. Don't do what the Games Workshop manager says. He says, get the starter box set, get the starter paint set, which is shit. Get your clippers, get your no. Get your dad's clippers. He'll have some. Your dad will have some. Somewhere he will have clippers. Right? Get some of those. Clip things off the sprue. Get some super glue. Build and paint one set of Space Marines or one set of whatever for £30 or $600 if you're living in Australia. But get one thing and build from there. which is kind of antithetical to our whole point, isn't it? That's not building an army, is it? That's getting one thing on the tabletop. So this is what I mean. It all comes back to the price and how much it kind of pushes you away. It's like, okay, well, if you can't afford this, then maybe don't even try. Which is, I'd love to get into the weeds of what can Games Workshop afford to charge us and still make a boatload of profit. I think Macca's probably best positioned to give us an answer on that. In terms of estimation, obviously, none of us are experts, but the price is a huge sticking point.
Well put.
Yeah, well put. If I can throw yet another wrench in the works here, what about in the case of factions where there is very little to work with to create an army? I have Emperor's Children on screen at the moment. There are 19 kits in plastic for that range. You go, that's not too bad. One of those is the Demon Prince. One is the Mark II Rhino, which is, 23-ish years old now?
At least.
The Chaos Space Marine Sorcerer, Keeper of Secrets, the Demonettes, the Fiends of Slaanesh, the Chaos Spawn from 4th edition, the Helldrake, the Seekers of Slaanesh, and the 25-year-old Chaos Land Raider. And the new Chaos Terminator. So by the time you take out everything that's sort of exists already, and it's just sort of being lazily slapped in here, it's really just Fulgrim, Award, Lucius, the Support Ward, the Cacophonist, the Flawless Blades, the Tormentors, and the Noise Marines. That's it. That's the faction. So this is a faction now that has become, by its virtue of such a limited supply of units, something where you can indeed collect the whole army. Does it actually fill an army? Like, do we consider 6 independent units to constitute a force?
By the virtue of how they've defined them, I guess it is what it is. Like it's not how I think anyone would prefer it, but look, there are obvious options that people would like to see for the Emperor's Children. I also think, specifically to 10th edition, this problem, this issue is masked quite a bit because they've gotten rid of Force Org. So, in the case of Space Marines with a super bloated range, you have just a giant list of units in alphabetical order to choose from, right? And then on the flip side, you have Emperor's Children, where it's, you don't think about Force Org. This is your collection of units to build your army with, and that is the Emperor's Children.
Yeah.
Does this count, though, as an army?
On my preferences, not really.
Because it's sold as an army. It is sold as an army. Yeah. But so to play into this a little bit, I have those examples that I showed you guys prior to the video starting, to like 10 seconds prior, of just some different lists that people have been building of Warhammer is putting out there. And they're talking about like the different forces that people have been putting together. And it makes for some pretty grim reading. I'll start with the Chaos one. So World Eaters, Ward Invocatus, okay? And then it's Berserkers, identical loadouts. And then 8-bound, Exalted 8-bound, World Eaters, Terminators, Spawn, Chaos Rapier, and a Rhino for, I guess, to fill out some points at this point. I could not have imagined that as an army back 10 years ago, let alone 20 years back.
It's a weird one. I've lamented the parting out of the God-marked legions the way they have. I don't like it just purely for what it does to the non-special Chaos Space Marine legions, right? The comparison, the feeling of unloved and being lesser than, I hate it. but GW has parted them out and given them such a limited range. Yeah, and look, people want to play. And then you get these armies that are just spam the 6 data sheets you have available to you ad nauseum and run with it. And then, the rules writers, I get the impression the rules writers are given these grenades to deal with by the company. Like, you have to make this work. This is the World Eaters now. Do your best, and then you have 2 weeks because a new codex is coming down the pipe. So, that's the impression I get of how things are probably working.
Well, okay, I'll give you another chaos list. I've got lists that aren't just chaos in here for people. Death Guard, we would all agree Death Guard, as far as God-marked forces go, is probably very well fleshed out. Really just needs someone to lead Poxwalkers at this point. I think it's essentially, that's the standard I would expect all of the armies to be.
Yeah, they're robust, right? No complaints there.
This Death Guard list, and again, this is tournaments, but we have a Death Guard Demon Prince, and then 10 Poxwalkers, and then 5 Plague Marines, 5 Plague Marines, 5 Plague Marines. Just identical loadouts. And then Fetid Bloat Drone, Fetid Bloat Drone, Fetid Bloat Drone, and then Plague Burst Crawler, Plague Burst Crawler, Plague Burst Crawler. And then there's like demons in there as well. Mammon Transfigured, and then 3 Nurglings, 10 Plague Bearers, Soul Grinder, Soul Grinder. So the recurring theme I see with these tournament lists is just, even when you have the options of multiple units, it's just this unit spammed 3 times, this unit spammed 3 times, this unit spammed 3 times.
Yeah, it's, I think, an unfortunate outcome of competitive play. Certain units will always be winners over others in a codex. It could just be the datasheet itself. It could be points at the time, just makes it more efficient. Like, a lot of the tournament or competitive mindset, for lack of a better phrase, that I kind of notice in my own local play group, comes down to, or the unit selection comes down to this kind of calculus around how much value am I getting per point? And, I'll have guys, telling me about the Rogel Dorn and all its attributes, but for the same points, you could get XYZ, and that's better. And they make these kinds of assessments when building an army, and it's all skewed by performance, right? The outcome of how potent these units are, which it's just an outcome of, I guess, the popularity of competitive play in 40K, right? It trickles down, right? I think I mentioned it before recording. There's a huge
That's a very important point to bring up, is tournaments are not indicative of the entire hobbyist mentality, right? Well, I mean, they're not indicative of the hobbyist itself, right? The tournament factor is almost its own side gig. The problem is, though, that Games Workshop writes their rules and balances with tournament play in mind. And tournament players do populate many of these stores and gaming groups, and inevitably, narrative players will come up against them, and then they have to either optimize their lists to compete against them, or understand that they're going to be on the back foot and probably lose their games, which I think it's safe to say people in general don't like losing, or at least they don't like knowing that they're going to lose, and they pretty much nothing they can do about it. It's not up to their general ship, it's not up to the luck of the dice, it's really just they're screwed from the get-go. That's the bit that's the catching point for people. And so tournament players have an impact on everyone else in the entire game system, and that impact does not occur the other way around. Hobbyists do not impact the tournament players in the least when it comes to the collections that they're making, the purchases that they are making, and the balancing of the game system. So it's entirely sort of one-way focused. And I bring up these lists because these lists are out there, therefore it's going to affect people regardless if they want to buy into these systems, I feel. I mean, am I wrong here, or?
No, I totally agree.
On a wider point, on what we're looking at with the. I'm just looking over. Sorry, I've been quiet. But looking over the 3 things you sent over. What I'm noticing on these lists, and you brought it before, is the repetition of units. But I think that is more a hint of 2 main points here. Number 1 is that the rules are absolutely skewed in, to be competitive, you need to take this. By and large, the hobby's always kind of been that way on a competitive scene, but not to the extent that we're seeing now. These lists are homogenous. You know what I mean? They are grey sludge lists. There is no expression here. It is literally, here are all my 8-pound, because this is the only thing I can take. That's terrible. And I think when you look at the release schedule of the World Eaters, this is what it's been like. You have 8-pound and Berserkers. Have fun. That's what we have. And there is one little bit of expression in that list, and it was the Terminators, the most useless part of the list. The one bit he's taken away, that's probably his pride and joy.
Yeah, probably.
Those Terminators are probably his pride and joy. He's probably like, oh, these are my guy, and they're off the table, top of turn 1. Because they're just shit.
So I would. Yeah, I would actually do your second point now, because I'm going to circle around to something that's also going to need your input, and I don't want to get you sidetracked.
Okay. So the next part of it is fighting against complexity. So the rules themselves, the base standard 10th edition rules, are needlessly complex. Games Workshop utterly failed in their modus operandi of this entire edition, which was simplified, not simple. Right? These are not, in my opinion, simplified rules. There are so many gotchas, so many pitfalls that you can fall into without even knowing they exist within the rules. Most of these lists are a rebellion against that. These are guys who are trying to save their brain power. Do you know what I mean? If you look at some of these lists where you have in the Emperor's Children, the Demonettes, right? Every single one of these 5 Demonette units or 4 Demonette units is exactly the same, right? You see that across the board. People's troops choices and their elite choices are all exactly the same units, because they're trying with exactly the same specials, because they're trying to save on brain power, bandwidth. They can't use their brain bandwidth, and some of them are autistic, so they have a lot of it, right? Even these dudes can't use that to express themselves, because the game's too needlessly complex. There's so many moving parts that they need. Even these very clever people, and tournament players by and large are very intelligent people. But I know it's a controversial thing to say, but by and large, we can all agree, right? So they go in, and even they need to dumb down their lists, because they just can't keep up with it. It's like an arms race of who can save their brain power more. And a lot of these lists, to me, what they scream, if I get to the Sunday of this tournament, my brain is going to be pulling up my ears. I need something that I can play on autopilot. No expression, no expression, oh, I want to really deep strike this over here because it makes it a really cool game. No, they want to play it on autopilot to just get the win, get to the next game. Because tournaments are a war of attrition. Do you know what I mean?
There's certainly there's certainly a strong inkling of truth there, I think, because in talking to the competitive pals in my local game store, man, tournaments are exhausting. It's a whole day of this incredibly taxing, mentally taxing game. I mean, even physically taxing. You're standing around for like 12 hours, right? If you're playing 3 rounds a day or 4 in some cases for some events, like it leaves you totally gassed. And so, yeah, people, competitive players want to build a list that's, as they term it, easy to pilot, right? It's very straightforward. They know how it works, X, Y, Z. I also think some of the homogeneity you're speaking to, or that you've pointed out there, North, is also just a result of the competitive structure itself, right? Like units, a lot of armies are getting, or a lot of different factions have overlapping mechanics because they're necessary for the game, right? So people will have their action monkeys, right? Their uppy downy units, their lone operatives, and so you'll start to see these crop around, right? You'll have your sticky objective units, your units that are hard to like an anvil, hard to shift unit of like a brick of Terminators, that sort of profile, right? Multi-wound, higher than average toughness, maybe an invuln save, maybe feel no pain, and then you start to get these similar compositions, regardless of faction, because of that as well. I just thought I'd add that in there before Maka moves the topic forward.
That's all right. I did type a note into our Discord chat and just said, it makes think of a new topic, which is what is the consequence of having the game being focused around, well, not having the units themselves bringing their own abilities that are isolated to them to the table, but having abilities that are auras or floating, like command points that are just nebulously clouds in the air that can be drawn down on different parts of the battlefield at any time. Like, the consequences of that to gameplay, but that's a topic for another time. I've put Grey Knights up on screen now. Has nothing to do with any of these lists, but I bring them up because if you go back to 5th edition Warhammer 40,000, and you look at the way the internal balance was within codexes, Grey Knights were one of those factions where you could throw a dart, you could put all the units, list them around a dartboard, and just throw darts, and you'd be able to make a viable army out of no matter what you hit. You can't
just because
do that now.
Because of the internal balance.
Yeah, internal balance in that time period. If you look at the Grey Knight roster and you go, well, there's Grey Knight strike squads, Drago, Brother Captains, Dread Knights, and Terminators. That's not much choice. Yeah, well, actually, it's a lot of choice between the items of war gear that they could take, whether they were running as Terminators or Paladins, whether they were running Librarian in the Force or not, whether you were running Rifle Naughts, whether you were taking Mass Purifiers. There were many, many different ways of running that army where you could, even with something as small and quote-unquote simple as Grey Knights, you actually had a myriad of ways to play the army. One of my mates, my co-host over at Outer Circle, Cat, he was running his ninja list, and it was 3 Land Raiders with just Death Cult Assassins in each Land Raider and a Tech Marine, where the Tech Marines could fix the Land Raiders up, and then, because that was back in the days and they were practically unkillable, and then they would just disgorge squads of Death Cult Assassins, which, hit like an absolute freight train on the charge. And that was just one of many different ways that you could effectively play that list. You don't see that today. What you see is you do not see a variety even within the same faction. So although I agree fully with you, North, on your point about people, taking a list and going, yep, they've taken this to reduce that brain drain, I would also say that you don't see a lot of creativity even within the scope of what there is to pull from when people do write their lists. They seem, to me at least, to end up very samey regardless. Like, you don't come along and see 8 completely different Ultramarines armies at an event. You see 8 Primaris Marine armies that are the same, if you walk past.
Yeah.
Because I don't know whether it's the game balance, whether it's purchasing, whether it's efficiency, whether it's just because everyone saw the latest net list and thinks it's easy to play. I don't know the reason. But
well, it's an interesting topic, right? Because I can't help but have my thoughts drift towards this idea of how much of this is by design. Dare I propose the idea, right? If we can see often with the Games Workshop's rules, like the clear winners, and often it feels like with every release, there's some outlying units that are so good. They're so good, and every time GW fails to pick up on how over the top they are until after all those products are out of stock, right? Coincidentally, funnily enough, it just happens to work out that way almost every time. Is it by design, those outcomes, these lists that are, this is like right now, this season, for quarter 2, 2025, this is the way to play Death Guard and World Eaters, right? They just came out. This is basically the best way. I think the outcomes are derived organically because the competitive players just sort of find what works for the mission structure that 10th edition uses. I also wonder, and maybe you can speak to this, Mac, like you're speaking to 5th edition Grey Knights. I wonder if a contributing factor to how much variety was able to be leveraged on the tabletop was a product of the mission structure being more narrative back then, rather than now. It's things have narrative names: assassinate, right? Assassination and slay the warlord. Or they don't even have that anymore. I hate this. They have assassination and bring it down. Like you have these generic terms, right? Deploy, teleport, Homer. They have these narrative titles, but it's not exactly what I would call a narrative mission structure.
Well, tournaments back then were just as cutthroat as now. If you were playing, say, Tyrannids 5th edition, one player would go Trigon Spam and just be spawning endless new spam of termagants onto the tabletop. And that would be a really effective army when it's an objective mission. There's 5 objectives scattered around the table, score a point for every objective you hold, type thing. Fantastic, you've got tons of scoring units. But then you go to the next mission and it's kill points. You know?
Right. Oh, before moving on, just real quick from my own understanding, speaking to that example, Tyrannids at the time, was that the only way to play Tyrannids effectively?
Oh, God, no. No.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
Yeah, winged hive tyrants. Trigon Spam, Trigon Ravener was one of the builds people would do at the time. Obviously, Gene Stealers used effectively was another popular thing. There were also some other big bugs people could pick from. I'd say there's probably 4 or 5 good builds that existed for Tyrannids in that time period, and they were not a great codex. They were definitely on the sort of downward spiral at that point. But if you're looking at the late 5th edition and you looked at, say, Grey Knights, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Dark Eldar, Necrons, like those 5 factions in particular had just infinite ways to play. You know, Necrons especially, there was Croissant Spam, where it was just Necron Flyers, just tons of them.
I remember that.
They could do things like use those Necron Flyers and take Death Marks. Death Marks had the ability to... they had an ability where you could put a Cryptek with them, and the Cryptek fired a Strength 10 AP 2 Flamer template, but it used your leadership as toughness, but then the Death Marks could drop your leadership to 2 or something ridiculous for that one turn with their special ability. So people would fly in and just drop 3 of those squads and just instantly just delete 3 of your units with just no recourse for you. But then you go... then you go up against the next Necron player, and he was just running 18 Necron Wraiths with whip coils. So he had Strength 6 in close combat with 3+ invulnerable saves and knocked all of your stuff down to Initiative 1. So they charged in and then just swing with a bajillion attacks, and there was just nothing you could do about it, right? And good luck killing them all, because 3+ invulnerable saves, multiple wound models, and many, many, many of them. Then you go up against the next Necron player, and it's a gun line of Tesla weapons, where every 6 to hit they roll, they get an extra hit, and this just keeps going until they stop rolling 6s to hit. And it would just be a ton of Necron Immortals with Tesla weapons. And it's that alone would be what you might come against in just a single tournament, a single event. But that's 3 completely different armies right there. Now, they spam certain units, for sure. That's always been a thing. But it wasn't just going to that event and every Necron player was Croissant Spam. That didn't happen.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I get the impression that's likely how things are presently from my competitive pals. This is my understanding. However, it seems to me the range, the extremes are much more narrow. And I also think, in fairness, because of the modern internet age and people putting up the winning lists, you're getting a tighter frame of what's best, rather than all the different points of variety from that on the ground level as you were describing. So I think that could be a factor as to why things feel a bit tighter. I do suspect it is a little tighter with regards to the kind of army variety you would find because of trends like net listing.
Well, I bring it up because...
I think also the mission structure makes a difference too. I think that's huge.
You also have a lot more units to pick from now. Most of these ranges have expanded. in this time frame. There are exceptions, Dark Eldar, but Necrons have expanded greatly since 5th edition. And I'm looking at a Necron list here, and characters-wise, it's got great variety. Hexmark Destroyer, Overlord, Royal Warden, Technomancer, and another Technomancer. And there's just like 2 token warrior squads, a 20-man and a 10-man. A Ghost Arc, okay, and then Canoptech Reanimator, Scarab, Crypto Thralls, Doomsday Arc, Heavy Destroyer, and then a squad of random Lich Guard. And it's like all these units have been added to the game, and I guess a fair few of them are in there, but at the same time, are they? Because that's only probably like 7, 10 different units, and 5 of those are characters. Like, it would be the inverse of that in old 40k editions. You would have 1 or 2 HQ choices only. So it's like, if you're not taking Marnis Kelgar and Kato Sicarius, I'll use a silly Ultramarines example. It'd be like one or the other, and then probably like a librarian or a chaplain, right? Some sort of buffing character.
Well, in this particular example, Awakened Dynasty gives you benefits when being led by characters, so this one's a bit skewed because of that incentive. You're going to want to have a leader on everything, basically. I believe I'm recalling that correctly. Let me look it up while you guys
chat. Well, read out another one of these army lists then. Autark Wayleaper, Farseer, the Incarnate, and then Fire Prism, Night Spinner, Shadow Spectre, Warwalker, Warp Spiders, Wraith.
I remember this list. Yeah. I mean, again, like, just drawing from my own experience, it is my own time. When it started at GW, we had the horrific time of the formations. Now, this was a time where Games Workshop basically took the mask off, and they said, okay, if you want to be competitive in any way, shape, or form, these are the models you buy from us. If you do not buy these models from us, you will not be competitive. That's what formations were.
Yeah, you'll be playing at a disadvantage.
Yes, Fire Prisms were a big part of that. And also, anybody who can remember playing against the Skyhammer detachment can, testify how fucking miserable 40k can get. You have like a Space Marine landing, shooting at you, and immediately pinning you. If you don't know what that does in 7th edition, most armies, when they're pinned, when they're down, have to pass a leadership check to get up, and even then, most people are hitting on doing anything on 6s. Right? But basically, as long as this army shoots at you, doesn't need to hit you, as long as it shoots at you, you're pinned from Skyhammer. It was ridiculous, and it was literally you don't get to play.
What were some of your favourite formations? I think the formation that gave every squad in your army a free Razorback would have to be my favourite. Decurion is up there, but the free Razorback on every unit. So it was like, here is a 50-point transport tank. By the way, Las build, so twin-linked plasma gun and a Las cannon on every Razorback. People were rocking up to 1,700-point games with 2,500, 3,000 point lists. But they just get all this extra stuff because this is what killed 7th edition, by the way. Listeners who aren't aware, because there'll be people who...
literally.
Yeah, it was so bad they had to do 8th edition, and the game was just hemorrhaging players as well, because people just went, this is awful.
Well, who wants to play against an army where everything has a 2-up invuln save? Like, it's just... Man, That's my favorite. That's my...
Oh, Screamer Star?
Yeah, or Raven Guard, right? I think both of those had it, I think. Not Raven Guard, Raven Wing.
Yeah.
Raven Wing had it, yeah.
Necron Decurion was another strong one.
That is... like, in the store, we had 4 or 5 people who did formation, and it came to the point where I had to pull in a community meeting. The manager didn't give a fuck, as long as people are spending money. So me and the other guy, I'm not going to name him because I don't name Shane. Not Shane, because he was a nice guy, but me and the other staff got everyone together around the gaming table and was like, okay, manager's off today. how would you guys want to do this? Because four of you clearly, not saying you shouldn't, but clearly love playing with formations. Everybody else argues with them because they hate it. Do you guys just want to do like tournaments on your own, just you four, like a little league table? I'll sort it out for you. And they were like, yeah, sure. So they went off and they did like a group thing, like a 4-man league. Great. Everybody else played. It literally split the entire store. We had the group of 4, and then that group like a group of 6, and then a group of 8 who all went and played formations. And then we had another 10, 15 people who just wanted to play 40k without any formations whatsoever. And it was just a massive ball ache to police. And I noticed a lot of the time you weren't called over to the fluffy tables to discuss rules and people getting things wrong. It was always the formation table. You're always going over trying to like put fires out because it was just miserable. It literally, if you want a really good example of what these kind of rules do to the community, they were just not enjoying their games and taking it out on each other.
Yeah.
And it's really, really shit.
I
just don't want to go back to it,
You just reminded me of one of the most cancerous armies I ever saw, and it was because of detachments combined with the allied rules. And it was like really early days, the very first detachments. One of them was a Tau detachment. Now, the Tau, for those who may not be aware, the crazy thought this, but Tau are a gunline army. They're all about firepower. And one of the big restrictions always was you only ever had 3 heavy support slots. So it was like, yep, you could take, 3 Riptides or 3 broadside battlesuit units, but that's it. You're only ever getting the 3. And it's going to be a ton of firepower, but at least it's sort of capped there. Well, I remember a person who took Farsight Enclaves allied in with regular Tau, so that gave them an extra heavy support from the Enclaves. So that brought them to 4, right? With buff commanders, so they took Tau commanders to buff the mixture of Riptides and Broadsides, and it was the missile broadsides with all the missile drones. So it was going to be like 2 rerollable 2+ to hit this kind of shit. And they did that, and then they also took a detachment for Tau, which gave them, they could take, I think it was a 3-man broadside battlesuit squad with, missiles and that again. So it was the equivalent of 5 heavy support choices for Tau. And then they had like 3 6-man fire warrior units to get their like 2 mandatory for the main army and the 1 mandatory troops choice for the allied detachment. That was their army. It was just like, it started the trend of what, like, it killed those editions, like 6th and 7th edition were killed by 7th in particular, detachments and formations destroyed the edition because they broke the balance so thoroughly. The editions I'm looking at now, I'm like, well, this is the same thing. It's just, you don't have to buy an expensive bundle from Games Workshop. It's just baked into your core rules of your faction now. So I've got another list here. It's Genestealer Cults, an Acolyte Icon Ward, a Magus, a Primus, and then Acolyte Hybrids, Acolyte Hybrids, Acolyte Hybrids, Acolyte Hybrids, Acolyte Hybrids, Neophyte Hybrids, Neophyte Hybrids, Neophyte Hybrids, Neophyte Hybrids, Neophyte Hybrids, Biophagus, Pure Strain Genestealers, Adelan Jackals, and a Goliath Truck. And then a Calamorph and a Nexus in, like, some non-entity thing. Like,
I'm tired just listening to it. I'm just like, oh, fuck off.
It's just the same unit over, and they're not even, like, interestingly modified units where it's like, this has this mix of special weapons, this has this huge mix. It's like 3 of the Acolyte Hybrid squads are just Cult Claws, Knife, Cult Lash Whip. And then the others are slightly different because they're heavy rock drill squads. It's like, it's just spam of the same units. So
yeah, spam is effective, unfortunately.
It is very effective.
It's the redundancy, right? You're just better. The reality is that you're better off with it.
Well,
it sparked the most joy, certainly, but
I just find it very sad because the big hobby goal when I got in, maybe this is just old man roast into nostalgia talking, but when I got in, it was collect an army. I mean, they still say that on the posters and that today when you go to a store, buy and collect an army. But I feel like you're not collecting an army anymore. I feel like you're just collecting whatever is unit of the month, and it's just take unit of the month. And, it's most extreme around tournament players where they just have a rotating roster of whatever army is army of the month, whatever can win in the current meta before it gets nerfed because it climbs above that 50%, 40% threshold, whatever, It's like, I'm not seeing, and myself, it's a purely selfish reason. I don't get to see all these cool armies anymore when I go online. When I go onto social media and forums to see what people are building, to see what they're painting, because, it's fun. It's fun to see what people are doing, get some creative painting ideas, go, maybe I want to make an army of that myself now that I've seen a really cool one. I don't get that anymore. I go on there and it's like, like those corn armies are just the worst. That's why I'll use them as an example. And it's just like, here is just berserkers and 8-bound, and it's just that constantly, and you're like, oh, really? Like, there's no inspiration there. Like, even when they're well painted, I don't find myself going, yeah, that's an army I want, because I'm like, well, I don't need to collect that army. I can collect literally 3 units, and I've painted everything that army has to offer. And it's really sad.
When you only, 100%. I think what you're saying is going to resonate with a lot of people. You're not just waxing to nothing here. But in the World Eaters case, when you only have so few units, it's like, where's the room for your expression, right? There very much barely any, right? Maybe you use the uncompetitive detachment, right? That's your room for expression. You do something really weird like that, right? They're in a tough spot.
But it's not just them. Even if I look at Space Marine armies, I do not see a great deal of variety of Space Marine armies, even though they're a faction that has they have so much variety up their sleeve.
Okay, yeah. So that reminds me of what I was going to say. I think this is probably, I don't want to get conspiratorial, but there might be some portion of what's contributing to this could be just by design. If there's only a certain amount of, at the very extreme of what's competitive, let's say, if there's only a small roster of units at a given time that creates the competitive list for the current mission pack, the current match play mission pack, your incentive is just to field what's that. You still might collect an Ultramarines army, the whole thing, but you'll only field what's good at the time, because that, competitively speaking, that's what's best going to serve you. And you're right, it does create these events, perhaps, or even just these online communities where you just keep seeing the same thing, not a lot of variety, not as much of expression as there used to be, just because I think the box tournament players specifically are working within is much tighter. It seems to be the impression. I'm kind of working through the idea of this on the fly here, but I think that's perhaps what's at play.
Yeah, because I don't know. It's hard to peg it down. As I look at the range of units, I think, well, there's, in Horus Heresy, for example, we're starting to see people leaning in. Units in the past, people would have units and they would just openly say, yeah, I know they're not very good on the tabletop, but I wanted to make them. I wanted to have them. I wanted to have them in my army, and that's great, right? And now I'm seeing a lot less of that, because people are like, well, this unit just outright is just so beaten over the head this edition by this unit. I don't know why I'd ever take this. To the point where you feel like you are being punished for taking a unit, if that makes sense. It's not just that it's not competitive, it's that it's actively feels like it's been sabotaged in its rules. I use jet bikes as a great example in Horus Heresy, because you guys don't play it, but jet bikes, they can't go over the top of units.
So they only operate at ground level.
Well, when they changed editions, they wrote all these new special rules around how units work, and they've got unit subtypes now, kind of similar to 40k, where it's like, this is, but jet bikes fall into this weird category where it's like, they're hovering, and they could never take cover saves because they're hovering up in the air, but they also can't just leapfrog over the top of units. There's nothing in there that says they have the ability to do it in the rules. Same with like land speeds, where it's like they can move into terrain, they can jump up into terrain and stuff, but nothing that says you can, because you're going through another unit. You can't do that in the game unless you have a rule like a jump pack that says you can go over units. They don't have any of this in there. So you end up with these sort of weird things where it's like, oh, cool. So I take this unit and I get all these negatives of like, I can't take like, cover saves from like having terrain in between me and you. I have to take a jink instead, which is going to affect my performance next turn with this unit. Oh, but I also have this other negative in that I can't move through other units. So like now I'm being like punished in multiple ways for trying to take this fun, fluffy, thematic unit. That sucks. So why would I want to buy it?
It's the worst. Yeah, I don't think dude. What you're saying resonates with me. I've lamented over my channel's like lifespan of how often it feels you're being punished by the rules, right? And I think that I framed it on multiple occasions. It's like, to me, that's like the worst sin as a 40k or Warhammer overall rules writer, is to punish the hobby efforts of the players who've invested, right, with their passion and money and etc. Right? Like it's the worst to me, anyways. Let us
kind of
not
like saying, are you expressing yourself over there? Are you? you like that unit, do you? Okay, you're going to take 3 of them? Yeah, well, go fuck yourself. Because you don't like those units. Yeah? We like Dread Knights. We don't like Terminators. So, take Dread Knights. No, they look stupid. Well, what if we put a dress on it? Will you take it then? No, it looks stupid. Well, you're not going to win any games then. It seems like there's no negotiation. There's no, like, wiggle room to say, you know what, like that Corn Berserker guy did before. Do you know what? I like these Terminators. But is it to put those models on the tabletop and be like, hey, I've got my lovely painted the Terminators here. I had them when I was 3 years old, and they're dead. Right. Okay. Well, I guess we're just playing the standard game then. Sorry, Kelly, I just.
I get it.
This like entire.
It's I don't mean to use the word triggering. I guess it is in a way. Like everyone who's into Warhammer is passionate about it for all the reasons we've kind of been mentioning over these Grimdark therapies, right? And naturally, it's like, yeah, I can never forget the edition and a half where Chaos Space Marines were 1 wound babies, whereas the Loyalists had their beefy 2 wounds, right? It's just, oh yeah, super super cool. I don't feel punished at all from the Chaos Space Marine perspective here, right? There's no disparity.
Are we having fun yet?
I think also. Sorry.
No, go for it, North.
I think also you have to remember, wargamers don't forgive. So, as a Grey Knight player, I can tell you, wargamers don't forgive. It's been 20 years since our broken codex, and still I'm getting hit over the head with it. But in terms of Chaos Space Marine players, they still say, no, fuck Games Workshop. Because we went an entire edition almost, under-leveled, underpowered, and literally just shat on by Primaris Space Marine players who had all these new things to play with. And even now they've got their own things, they still hold on to it. But I forgive them for that, because you look at the investment that it takes to get into a war game than it takes to just download a video game. The difference in time that you need to throw into your dudes, right, to get them up to tabletop standard. Especially if you're in a community like Macca's in over in Australia, right, where you're in Horus Heresy, so you got to turn up with the spangles on. You got to have your dudes looking good. At the disco, man, you've got to get them down there.
Mm-hmm.
You do all that, and then the company itself just shits on you height and just no communication, nothing. This is why I forgive people who hold grudges. Who say, "Oh well, it's Games Workshop. You can't just keep doing that all." Yeah, you can. It's unlike a video game that can get patched. If your dudes are broken for an entire edition, congratulations, you're not enjoying the game for several years. Game that you put several hundred of your pounds of your own money into, when times are hard, and these fuckwits have the ball, the gall, like charge you all of this money and then give you substandard rules. That seem like passive aggressive. It always seems passive aggressive, like how anti certain factions they can be. Don't ever think, if you're watching this, don't ever think that you're judged because you hold a grudge. No, mate, you hold that grudge. It's fuck them for doing shit like this to certain factions. It's horrible.
So I'm gonna just sidetrack a little bit from the topic, but I did a video the other week about chaos players whinging, and because I mentioned, and I know I mentioned it as well when we spoke after the Depticon reveals North, about how good for the Space Wolves, the range refresh looks good, but I kind of feel like other factions needed more first, and the amount of salty Space Wolves players, Space Wolves, we haven't got anything in ages, Chaos all updated kits. And then it was like, well, let's go back through and look at when you got your kits and how much shit you got. And they got so much stuff over the last couple of decades. It's insane. And that's just one Space Marine faction. It's like, so no wonder, it's not. I used Chaos as the example in there because the people commenting referred specifically to Chaos. Chaos players are never satisfied. It's like, well, no, because you're looking at them as one homogenous faction, not understanding that Chaos players do not see themselves as one homogenous faction. They're very, very much self-serving, looking like, if you're a Night Lords player, you're sort of like that John Travolta Pulp Fiction, just the turning from side to side, looking around him in the room. That meme? That's the Chaos players, because like if you're playing Night Lords or Word Bearers or Iron Warriors or Alpha League, you don't have shit. Like you're a non-faction, right? You're doing you and other Chaos Space Marines is your paint scheme. There are no cool miniatures for you. So and again, this is part of like that homogenous blob of people don't collect an army anymore. It ties back into that to an extent, because it's like, well, those Space Wolves players, they can collect an army. They have the option of doing that. Night Lords don't. Word Bearers don't. There are many factions that have fallen into this trap. Even those like that have a range and haven't had an update in a while still find themselves, in that purgatory. So my question, I guess, would be, how do you fix it? What minor things need to be done to encourage people to collect a diversity of units again, so that they can actually showcase armies and not character plus 3 units spammed 8 times?
I suppose if you could just, I'm going to propose just one or one idea. I think probably. So a while ago, I made it. I think it was in my Chapter Master, or what's the deal with Chapter Master's critique? I think it was in there, but I described this idea that I think you need to split competitive from standard. I think the core rules should say the game works XYZ. Here's your narrative scenario mission packs, right? And then competitive exists as a layer on top of it, rather than the foundation that's trickling up, I guess, in this example. If that makes sense to you guys, right? Because I think right now it's the inverse, right? The core rules are written for competitive matched play, and then, good God, we don't have to talk about Crusade as the narrative solution that exists on top. That's just a mess of rules bloat, right? But I think that needs to be inverted. It's like the pyramid needs to be flipped, I think, and I would hope that would create incentives for the more average player to collect an army, rather than collect the 3 of what's best and then character support. Perhaps. Competitive is always going to be popular, though. It's always going to be.
I think competitive is still going to skew it, though.
It's the most popular. Like, I think if you look at the content creators on YouTube as a good example, just the competitive channels are more influential. And I think that's like a human nature factor, like is contributing to that as well. Like people want to know what's good, what's strong right now. There's a lot of that energy with the casuals in my local play group that, you know, they don't go to tournaments, but they're always talking about what's the meta list, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It's a tough. It's like a wicked problem.
I would take your point and go even further. You're going to hate this, but if I was in charge, I would literally say, okay, this game is going away. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to literally have a not OPR, but like a very similar. Warhammer 40,000 is on one page and the back page. That's it. Those are your core rules, and every single army has, you know, core rules on the front and special rules on the back that you can take and use as you will. Each army has 2 or 3 stratagems, right? And that's the core game, right? That is your core game that you get for free. It's the narrative game. It's the get your dudes on the table and blow shit up game. That's what you do, right? And then you move into what Kaifa just said there, and then you say, okay, and by the way, here's a massive book with really crunchy rules in it that is Codex Tournament, or, you know, or something like that, or Codex Crunch, or whatever you want to call it. And that is for tournament players. It is a complex, easy to learn, difficult to master system that is, you know, fairly balanced but incredibly broken in its own way. That's the kind of thing that you do. You're never going to try not to please everybody. I know that's going to be the common argument of, well, if you try and please everybody, you please nobody. I don't think that's true with 40k. I think you can actually please everybody. If you know, if you know, it would also take a lot of that guesswork out. And one of the main frustrations in Hobby Nightmares is people turn up for games and the 2 players want different things from the hobby, right? Well, if one of you is playing tournament rules or wants to play tournament rules and one of you wants to play the fluffy base rules, you have a clear, you know, delineation of, and, you know, demarcation of, okay, this guy isn't going to play the same game I want to play. Maybe I play his game for 1 round and then we play another game where we play my game for 1 round, that kind of a thing. It may lead to a splintering of the community, but it's already that way. So, but all we're doing is we're giving clear things. So if you like this, you have your space. If you like this, you have your space. And of course, you can cross between. If you want to try it one way for a couple of weeks, you can cross between them. And that kind of a thing. That's what I would do. So I take your idea, Kaifa. It was what I was going to run with, but I'd probably take it even further than that and say, no. Like the core rules are literally, you know, a lot of people from one page rules. I'd want to bring them back. I'm like, okay, well now you have that over here with the official rules. Now you don't need 1 page rules. So here's the official thing.
I like what you're saying.
I like it a lot, the idea of having 2 rule systems. I just don't think that they would ever, you know, it's such a lazy company.
Well, there's no incentive. It's the crocodile, right?
Yeah, my solution would be a little bit more simple than that. And that's really just artificial restrictions. Artificial restrictions, namely Force Org Chart, has been a fantastic thing when used correctly over the years. You know, when Heresy said things like, yep, you can include a Titan in your army or a Lord of War unit, you know, it was the first game system to do that. It was then borrowed by Warhammer 40,000 7th edition. They said, oh, that's actually really good, let's use that. They said, yep, take a Lord of War, but it can't be more than 25% of your points. 7th edition forgot that part. So, but it was an artificial restriction. It was, you know, to stop people like taking a Primarch in, you know, a 1,000-point game. There used to be 0 to 1. You could have this unit. We know it's powerful. You can take 1. All right. Bring this sort of shit back.
Force Org would certainly help.
Stop the spamming of the same unit. Say 8 bound, 0 to 2. Exalted 8 bound, 0 to 1. Right. And now you're like, okay, what are you going to do with the rest of your army? You know, Khorne Berserkers, 0 to 3. Right? I know it sounds, mean to say to people like we're removing choice from you, but it's like, fuck, they've removed choice from you literally everywhere else already.
Yeah.
like they've already taken weapons off units. They've already taken weapons off characters. They've already taken the ability to even arm your characters with, your choice of loadout away from you. Like now this is Monopose character. You will buy and enjoy Monopose character. So it's like, no, put those artificial restrictions back in. They are very effective at forcing people to diversify their armies because they can't just rely on spamming the same unit over and over. A great example of this is like in your Total Warhammers. Like if you play Total Warhammer and you look at that game, by the late game, people just spam one unit in their armies. They just find what's a very effective unit and they just take a whole bunch of that. And it's, their army is, it's 19 Necrofex Colossus, and that's an army. 19 Bloodthirsters, that's an army. It's
on that really good point. This is one of the reasons why I love Total War. So one of the things I used to love about the old Medieval 2 and mods that have that in mind as well. Shogun did this as well.
Your recruiting pool.
Yeah, your recruiting pool, right? So you have, knights are expensive. I don't know anyone knows anything about history, but knights were not very common. It was mostly men at arms and farmers with pitchforks, and the knights would be your armored core. There were no full armies of knights. That would be ridiculously expensive. How are you going to equip them all? And again, people have this in their mind that 10,000 warriors aside was normal. No, it wasn't. That's like a massive battle in the medieval age. We're talking like 1,000 each, so Total War is actually very accurate on that point, with the size of the battles and stuff. But in terms of actual economics, the game really works that way, where you have the AI and yourself, you're forced into making really balanced combined armies, Swiss Army knife armies. You have your longbowmen, your men at arms, your peasants. All of them serve a purpose, and you're forced to tactically think about how you're using your units. You can't literally run around the field with your knight charging into Tom, Dick, and Harry, because if you lose one of these dudes to a crossbowman, it's going to take you 10 turns to train the fucker back up again because he's a knight, right? You can't just replace them off the field. These are guys you need to use sparingly, and you need to basically hammer and anvil them into exactly the right spot every single time. But if you do it properly, they'll win the battle for you. That kind of a thing. That's balance. That's depth. That's what you have. And so to Macca's point there, it's true. What we have, my main frustration with Total Warhammer 3 right now is you get to an arms race with the AI where if you're not just spamming Bloodthirsters, if you're not just spamming, hell cannons and things, you're losing, because that's what the AI tends to do. Without mods, the AI, and even with mods, the AI fights back against the mods and goes, no, I want to spam this thing. And it just... As soon as you go to like a fantastical setting, side rant, you start to lose the real life economics of what's actually realistic. But to end my point on this, I've always said this. People say to me, 40k is a really good place to write fiction. No, it isn't. And I'll tell you the main reason for that now. 40k, you're literally on a beach and there is no limitations, which means you have paralysis. You can literally do whatever you want, so you do nothing, right? The whole point of being a good writer and having some really awesome times writing some lore or whatever it is you're writing is you have limitations. You're sitting in a sandbox that has clear boundaries of what is and is not possible. And within those boundaries, within those rules, you create something really cool because you're using them as scaffolding for your story. It's Sanderson's law of magic. Your magic system is only as interesting as its limitations. That's it. If you have a magic system that's completely capable of anything, it's not very interesting. It loses all of its mystique, right? So it's the same thing, pulling it back in to army composition in Warhammer, right? The minute the game tells you to incentivizes you to take 10 8-bound units, be still my torn, gaping anus, as I like to say, for God's sake, right? The minute it starts doing stuff like that is when you lose me. Because I'm now, within those limitations of having to take, if you're an Imperial Guard player, you have to take normal troops, maybe a couple of heavy weapons teams to fill out your army because you're only allowed to take so many tanks and so many walkers and things like that. You have your armored core there that can absolutely lance the battle in your favor. But you can't take a whole army of them. You can't literally lean on your elite choices like a crutch the entire time. With Grey Knights, right? We're seeing lists of 4 or 5 Dread Knights. Fuck off! But that's so stupid, right? Grey Knights, Dread Knights are supposed to be a limited, finite resource that are only brought out when they're most direst of circumstances, when there's a greater demon on the field, right? When that thing absolutely needs to die, that's what they send in. But normally, if you're a Grey Knight list fighting Guardsmen or fighting Space Marines, you wouldn't use one. You don't need one, right? You're Grey Knights. This is what I mean. Combined arms that are enforced by the game because you have limitations is where you can actually express yourself. I know it's counterintuitive, but think about it. That's all. I implore people just think about it. That in the limitations is where you find your expression. It's when Games Workshop say, "Yeah, there are no real limitations," although there are, right? And they say, "Okay, build whatever you want. There's no limitation. Do whatever you want." That's when you sort of give arseholes free reign and free license to be arseholes. I'm going to take all these 8-bound. I'm going to take all these Grey Knight Paladins. Not that they're any good, but you know what I'm saying, right? Overpowered units. That's me. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, but like that's literally,
it's true though.
In the limitations is where you can find your actual expression.
It's true. It's when we saw things like with the Tau in 5th edition, 6th edition, when they had the Riptide and they said, these things are super rare. There's only like a dozen in the Tau Empire. It's brand new tech. And then you see 5 in a guy's army. Like, well, they're all here. Found them, Yeah. Funny mechanic. No, I love the way Heresy does restrictions because it goes like you can, the Rights of War is such a brilliant mechanic. It's better than the way 40k and Age of Sigmar do their army composition, where they say to you, like, this is the itemized, buy this and put these together and you get a bonus, right? They do that crap. What is it? Not War Scrolls. I forget the name of the system, like your formations type thing, where it says, if you take 2 of this unit, 1 of this, then all units in this particular like group of 3 get, rerolls to hit of 1 in close combat. So they do things like that. And Heresy doesn't do that. Heresy goes, yep, you want to take an all-Terminator army? You can. This is called a Right of War. You need to now include this HQ. You now need to include this HQ. You can't take these allies, you can't take these fortifications, you can't take these heavy support units, you are restricted from using this deployment type, these kind of things are what happen there. But you can take all Terminators, you're trading it all, you're putting all your cards, all your coins, I should say, on red or black, at the casino.
Doing that is really empowering. Can you imagine being that player, knowing like, here we go, all Terminators. The guy goes, "Oh, are you taking that right for?" Yep. And you go, "Oh," and people like look over, like, "Oh my god, okay." I did that back in the day with in an Apocalypse game with 99 Paladins and Trigon. It was fucking awesome. I got my shit pushed in, but it was really, really cool. Because people look over using that. I haven't just snuck it in under the radar because the game lets you. You've gone into the rules and you've seen, oh, I can have this entire detachment of Terminators here. That'd be insane. I've got to do it. That's. Do you know what I'm saying? That's where the excitement comes from. And not sneaking it in because the game says go for it.
I mean, that's probably the way to remedy the problem, to bring to Maka's point, right? Because, like in 40k's present landscape, you have these detachments that give you these perks, but without any restrictions, right? I mean, there's the odd except you play Dark Angels. There's one that asks you to, or that doesn't even ask you. It just really encourages you to play Ravenwing, right? The only exclusions are around faction-based, characters or faction-based units, right? Yeah, there's a severe lack of restrictions.
Yeah, so, and I think this is, again, what's given the Horus Heresy a lot of the staying power and why it's considered to be quite a well-balanced system, notwithstanding the issues with the current version of the game. But, hey, don't FAQ something for, like, a couple of years and see how healthy it'll be. I just love the way that that's done. You know, even down to the Legion rules themselves in the Horus Heresy, they do the same thing. They go, "Yep, your Legion gets this," but you know, there's a lot of that goes
Oh,
on.
I adore that like completely. It's so good.
You
Like, I
know,
look at
It's
those
my
rules so
favorite
fondly.
part of any role playing game is traits. When you get this, but this. Love that.
Dungeons and
It's like
Dragons
you're a
sort of
drunkard.
started that, right? Like it was the
Yeah.
original, like, hey, you're an elf. By the way, you're an effeminate little bitch who's strength 3, you know, instead of strength 4. Like, suck it up, type thing. You always had a negative strength modifier if you're playing elves in Dungeons and Dragons, but you had like boosted dexterity. So you know, trade-offs are wonderful things, and it's just sort of been forgotten in opening up the game to take whatever you want at the same time as they close down the items of war gear, the ability to kit out your units how you want. Ironically, they actually made it a smaller game, I think. 40k and Age of Sigmar both. Heresy still plays like the old school way, and you see it in that, go out and have a look at what the Heresy armies actually look like at events. They are so radically different from one another, and they are actual armies. They feel like armies still. They are old school collecting in this hobby what it is. I think that's, again, part of what the draw is maybe as to why I love Horus Heresy so much versus, you know, I do play Age of Sigmar. I think that's superior to 40k. 40k is my no touchy zone. You know, that's my doctor feels bad. But yeah, for that specific reason, it's like if I go and look at an event that's on, you know, I go to a local games club or whatever, and I have a look in what they're doing, and it's just like the most bland, generic net listed armies. You know, or I can go over to my happy place in Horus Heresy. You know, it's the Billy Madison happy place. You know, the dwarf on the unicycle and the chick in you know the tight lingerie bringing me beers. Like, it's my happy place because I get to see actual hobby going on, some cool ideas, and I don't know, it's just something just so fucking great about that versus like the grey slop over in 40k of like, you know, was it acolytes like oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think
£8, £8,
you really honed in on something that you've created a smaller vibe in your game system for opening it up so freely without any restrictions. There's a nugget there, I think.
yeah, just write thematic builds with restrictions for these armies. Just say, like, yeah, there's going to be restrictions. There's going to be 0 to 1. We're going to bring that back. We're going to bring back, you know, and because realistically, 40k these days is a game system that doesn't play over 2,000 points. Like, how often does it really play that higher points? So you don't need to have this infinite force organization chart because you're never going to have infinite units on the tabletop. So why not enforce some sort of... And you think it would be beneficial to the company because it might encourage people to buy other things for their armies. You know, to revisit the faction rather than just, all right, I've bought these 3 units, now I'm done. But of course we know they don't think about the customer after they've made their initial purchase. That's...
You've only got your money. You're in. Yeah. You anymore. You become a regular rather than a recruited customer. You lose all importance.
So yeah, I think that sort of brings us to a natural conclusion. Armies no longer exist as pure armies. I think it's fair to say. Like, I already felt that before I came in, but I suggest as a topic anyway because I wanted to dissect it a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's probably a portion. There's an exception, right? There's gonna be people with, dare I say, people like myself, men of culture, who will self-impose those restrictions in their armies to create something that does have some expression, right? That does exist, but it's definitely not represented in the popular pool of like competitive play and match play. I think that's fair to say.
So, any final thoughts, North?
Not really. I think we covered everything that I had on my. So as we first started up here, I'd made a few bullet point notes. No, we covered every single one of them without me needing to bring any of them up. Well, I brought a few of them up. And we're all good.
So, I guess next time we all get together, you're going to be hosting, North. Have you got a topic in mind yet?
I don't. I think let me just check my. I've got a channel ideas page here somewhere. I think I do that. No, I don't. But I will think of one though, and I will come back to you. I may try and get Mordian on next time. We'll see. We'll talk about some Horus Heresy because he brought up some really interesting points yesterday from a 40k player's point of view on why Heresy is better than 40k in a lot of ways. And why, as a bolt action player, like for him, it's so good going over to Heresy rather than 40k, which I thought was really interesting. Because they're both historical war games. Think on that for next time.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. It's funny that actually, because people often say Horus Heresy is not historical. Yeah, it is. It's a historical in that setting.
It is.
It's not historical as in it really happened, but it's historical in that it has restrictions based upon it being in the history of that.
You recreate Talon.
So, yeah, no, cool. Well, we're not going to be meeting back for at least a week because I'm not going to be here. You guys might do something, but I won't be. I am keeping an eye, though, North, on your channel because I gave you a bit of a challenge the other day, I saw. Playing out to essentially write some fixes to chaos, and I gave you a left and right of arc of how to try and achieve it, which was quite enjoyable.
We did the first, we did the first half of that on Chaos Sucks, that video. Where we set up the bones, what we were going to do, and the next video, probably going to drop next weekend, is going to be about what we're actually going to be doing with chaos going forwards and how I'm going to fix it. We'll see if I can not upset a lot of people, but that's very chaos people. It's fine.
That's okay. When you've done that one, I'm going to have another challenge for you. So I'm going to keep them coming. No pressure.
Never ending.
Anything you'd like to say before we go, Noor? Sorry, Kaifa?
I mean, on the channel side of things, just homebrew rules, community stuff, community wholesome interactions at the moment. Just an area of the hobby I'm just kind of exploring, just to better round the understanding of people's sensibilities. I think there's by the time this one releases, I think there'll be a cool Space Marine successor chapter you can check out it should they be interested.
Cool.
You like the sound of that?
Yeah, I'm interested. I won't be able to see anything for the next week, hardly, but yeah. All right, well, that's it for this episode of Grimdark Therapy. I hope everyone had a blast listening in. Obviously, go check out Kaifa's channel, What the 40K, and North's channel, Northern Exile. If you want to go through the back catalogue of episodes, I do have a playlist which I've collated all of these episodes into, available on the channel. Or you can just sort of wander around like a homeless person until you find the episode that suits you best. Apart from that, I guess we'll catch you all next time.
Hi, guys.
See ya.